Really the big idea today. Here's my sermon in a sentence. Oftentimes when it comes to following Jesus, there is a fine line between faithfulness and foolishness. Yes, there is a fine line between faithfulness and foolishness. It kind of looks like Lamont Thomas, who when he saw some kids in his community who were in need, he did something to serve them that everybody thought was kind of foolish. Yeah. Adopting 5 kids when you should be golfing, you should be fishing. Seems foolish from a worldly perspective. But when you take the attention off yourself and you put it on other people, that's what faithfulness to Jesus looks like. And when we begin to love our neighbors, we might feel foolish every once in a while. Right? If you mow your lawn for your neighbor, if you haven't done it before, you don't have a good relationship with your neighbor, you might need to ask them. Right? It might be a good thing to ask, hey, I'm going to be mowing my lawn. Would it be all right if I mow your lawn? And they might be like, well, I like to mow my lawn. Get off my lawn, right? And be like, okay, Gran Torino, okay. I feel kind of foolish, okay. Or right, maybe you're like, I'm going to bake cookies. I'm going to bake cookies for my neighbors. And so you take the cookies over and you're like, hey, I'm from New Life. And, I'd love you for come to my church. And is there anything I can pray for you about? And they look at the cookies and they're like, we're gluten-free. They're like, oh, all right, next time. You might feel a little foolish. But that's okay. Because when it comes to following Jesus, there's oftentimes a fine line between faithfulness and foolishness. Kind of like William Borden. I don't know if you ever heard the story of William Borden. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, heir of the Borden family fortune, born in the late 19th century. His parents had made millions of dollars in the silver industry, mining silver. As a graduation present from them when he graduated from high school, they sent him on a trip around the world. He went all throughout Europe, all throughout the Middle East, all throughout Asia. And when he was visiting a specific people group in northwest China that didn't have the hope of Christ, they were coming from a Muslim background, hadn't heard the name of Jesus before, his heart broke for them. And he felt God calling him to become a missionary. And he wrote back to his family of his desire to become a missionary. And so when he comes back home, all of his friends and his family say, what? That's foolish. That's complete foolishness, William, for you to be a missionary. You don't have to work another day in your life. You can do whatever you want. Like, you could be the CEO of a company. You could start a foundation and send missionaries out. Like, you shouldn't go to the mission field. That's ridiculous. That's foolishness, William. So they asked him to reconsider, but he says, no, that's what God's called me to do. And so in the back of his Bible, he penned 2 words, no reserves. He said, no reserves. He says, I'm going to give everything, leverage everything for the kingdom of God. After high school, he went to Yale University. And at that time, it was a Christian university, but there wasn't a lot going on in the student body in terms of spiritual life. And so he started a Bible study and prayer movement at that college. By the time he was a senior in college, the historians say that about 80% of the student body were meeting in these prayer groups before class. He was a leader. He was gifted. A lot of things going for him. When he was in college, he penned these words in his journal that summarized his other-centered focus. He says, say no to self and say yes to Jesus every time. That's the thing that kept him focused. Say no to self and say yes to Jesus every time. And after he graduated from college, a lot of corporations, organizations offered him jobs. But he turned them down, and he wrote another 2-word phrase in his Bible. Next to no reserves, he wrote no retreats. So no retreats. God has called me, and I'm going to be faithful. After college, he went to continue his theological studies at Princeton Theological Seminary. Ended up graduating from Princeton. Prepared himself to go to this people group in China. But he thought it would be best for him to go to Egypt in order to learn Arabic so he could communicate the gospel to this Muslim people group in China. So he moved to Egypt, started learning the language. Unfortunately, shortly after he moved there, he contracted spinal meningitis, and within a few days he was dead. And many people looked at his life and said, what a waste. What a fool. And yet on his deathbed, he penned 2 more words in the back of his Bible. Next to no reserves and no retreats, he penned these words, no regrets. no regrets, because he knew the one who had called him. He knew that God would be faithful. And unbeknownst to him, after he died, his story inspired hundreds, possibly thousands of missionaries who took the gospel, the good news of Jesus, to the four corners of the earth. Guys like Jim Elliot, who ended up giving his life in order to take the gospel to a savage group of Indians in Ecuador. And Jim Elliot, when he was in college, he penned these words. He said that he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. Now, oftentimes, friends, when it comes to following Jesus, there's a fine line between faithfulness and foolishness. So how about you? What is God calling you to do that might seem a little bit foolish? Maybe, when we challenge you to do this, I think we're kind of leading by example as a church, right? That's why we're meeting in this building right here. We're meeting in an old Budweiser distribution center. And when I take church leaders, church planters, they come and visit, I take them a tour around the building. I show them all the facilities, and we get into here. We get into this space. I'm like, there's the stage, and we set up those chairs and those carpet squares every week. And they look at me with this confused look on their face. And they say, so Sean, you're telling me that this church, that New Life, spent millions of dollars to buy a building in which it's portable, in which you have to set up and tear down every single week. That's what you're telling me? I'm like, that's what I'm telling you. Man, that seems foolish. That seems foolish, because so many church planters are like, we've done the whole setup and tear down thing, and we can't wait to get our own building so we don't have to do it anymore. And you guys bought a building so you can continue to do it. Yeah. Why? Because, we get to serve hundreds of thousands of people in our community every single year. And because we know that sometimes there's barriers for people coming to church. A lot of church buildings, it's kind of foreign territory. But we know that if God can work on somebody's life, if somebody receives an invitation to church and it's at a place where they've been, a place that they call their home, like the end zone, they will be more open to receiving that invitation and coming. We want this to be neutral turf for our community so they can experience the gospel when they're here on Sunday mornings and 7 days a week. And it might seem foolish. It's sometimes foolish to churches when they hear that we invest 12% of all our offerings to go and start new churches elsewhere. Right? People ask me, what do you do? I'm like, I work for Pastor for Planting. What do you do? I train church planters. And so you plant other New Lives. That's oftentimes what they ask me. You plant other New Lives? And no, they're not other New Lives. They're just independent, autonomous churches. They don't spread the New Life brand. We don't get any, kickback from them. We just do it because we want to expand God's kingdom, not the kingdom of New Life, but God's kingdom. It seems kind of foolish from a business perspective, but that's what faithfulness to Jesus and his vision and his mission looks like here at New Life. Right? It might seem foolish. It might seem foolish to some of us to give of our hard-earned money to the church. How does that make any sense? It's I've got limited resources, and you want me to give a portion of it to God. How does that make any sense? There was actually a guy that recently came on staff here at New Life, and he was talking with his financial advisor about retiring from his career, and his financial advisor said, you could retire, but you'd have to stop giving to church. And he says, well, that ain't happening. And he continued to give, and God showed up in a miraculous way and provided for him in ways that he did not expect. So here's the foolish thing. The foolish thing is to think that 100% of your income without God's blessing will actually go further than 90% with his blessing. That's the real foolish thing. It might seem foolish, though, to give of your hard-earned money or your time, your energy when you feel like it's limited. But when you know that this life is temporary and there is a Christless eternity that some people are facing, it's not foolish to sacrifice and to put your attention, take the attention off of yourself, off of your own needs, and give it for others. So I want you to really think, what is your next step? What is your next step when it comes to following Jesus in order to love your neighbor, in order to take the attention off of yourself and put it on other people? As Pat said in the announcements, take this list, look through it, pray through it, and say, man, maybe there's a friend, maybe there's someone in your life who's going through a really hard time. Maybe there's someone that you know that they've recently lost a loved one, and you can take them a meal just to remind them that you're thinking about them, that you're praying for them. Maybe you know somebody that's in the hospital, someone who's sick, maybe who's shut in, and you can go visit them, right? You're busy. But that's what faithfulness to following Jesus looks like. Maybe for you, you're the thing that God's calling you to do today is to be baptized, to surrender your life to Christ for the very first time in the waters of baptism. And I get it. Some of us, we wrestle with that decision because it seems kind of foolish, especially if you're older. You sometimes hear this in your head, isn't baptism for like 13-year-olds? You know, for like maybe those kids, and they come to understand that they're a sinner and they need God's grace, and so I know that, and I kind of know that, I understand that, but now I'm 30, now I'm 40, now I'm 50, now I'm 60, and I've never made the decision to be baptized, but I know that. I know that I'm a sinner, and well, wouldn't it be foolish for me now to be baptized at this old age? So you're going to let your pride get in the way of you surrendering your life to Christ, being obedient to Jesus. Or maybe some of you are like, I don't know, like I've seen the pictures of people. I've seen people come out of the water, and they look like a drowned rat, right? You know, you're just like, I see the women, they're like got the mascara coming down. It's like Alice Cooper out there. Like, they look so foolish. Welcome to following Jesus, my friends. Welcome to following Jesus. There's a fine line oftentimes when you're following Jesus between faithfulness and foolishness. So if you've never been baptized, you've never surrendered your life to Christ in the waters of baptism, I pray that you would make that decision today. You wouldn't leave today without talking to me, talking to someone in the back about what does it look like to completely surrender your life to Christ in the waters of baptism.